There's a great quotation in Hemingway's novel, The Sun Also Rises, where two fellows are talking to each other about going bankrupt. And one guy asks the other, "How did you go bankrupt?" And the man responds, "Slowly and then suddenly." That's what happened in the collapse of the Soviet Union, and I think that's what's going to happen in the collapse of the Russian Federation. We'll see. I hope we're prepared. Welcome back, everybody. The situation in Ukraine is fluid and changing. Today, I'd like to talk to you about what's happening and give you my assessment of what comes next. What's interesting to me is that we know more about what the Russians are doing than what the Ukrainians are doing. This is a good thing. The Ukrainians have done a superb job of what we call OPSEC, operational security. The Ukrainian counteroffensive focused initially in the Kherson region. This is very important psychologically and politically because Kherson is the first and only capital of an oblast, a province that was captured by the Russians. So there's an important strategic and psychological reason for liberating Kherson. There's an operational advantage to it as well. There are thousands of Russian troops that are on the right bank of the Dnipro. The Dnipro River, of course, is Ukraine's most important river, and it flows into the Black Sea. And the bridges that connect that side back to this side of the river have been under attack nonstop the last several weeks, so that the Russians cannot bring in food, ammunition, water, and the Russians are going to have a real hard time evacuating heavy equipment out of there, as well as many of the troops. Kherson, of course, is also important because once this area is relieved, then we'll start getting a lot closer to Crimea. Right now, it's about 240 kilometers straight line from Kherson to Sevastopol. But once you get here and you start bringing HIMARS forward, longer range weapon systems, now they start having the ability to directly attack various bases inside Crimea. And potentially, Sevastopol and other Russian bases in Crimea become unusable. However, I'm not so sure that Kherson is the main effort, because there was so much talk about a counteroffensive happening here by Ukrainian forces, this big counteroffensive in the south. Meanwhile, we have seen a significant increase in Ukrainian operations around Kharkiv. So in fact, it could be that this was done intentionally to draw Russian forces here, and that the main attack was always going to be up here. Either way, the fact that they have marshaled enough forces and protected the information about what's going on so well, that's a different level of operational art. The Russians have realized that they cannot protect their rear. And now we see even more cases of partisans, or perhaps it's Ukrainian special forces being very active in the rear area of the Russian occupied zone, which causes additional confusion. And of course, with each ammunition storage point that's destroyed, the Russians have to move ammo further to the rear, which then puts an additional strain on their dwindling number of trucks, which is why we're seeing a reduction in the artillery effects of the Russian army. Another thing that has struck me is very interesting. It's a reflection of the corruption inside the Russian military. It's a sign of lack of discipline, will, and it's a sign that they don't have sergeants. Every video I see of a Russian position that has been overrun or destroyed or captured, or vehicles that have been destroyed, everywhere you see trash, you see personal kit lying around, ammunition lying around. In other words, they don't look like they're ready to fight. Real professional soldiers, when they're in the combat zone, have their stuff packed, put away, ready to go, so that if they had to move quickly, forward or backwards, they're not leaving everything around them. This is a reflection of an army that is not prepared to fight, doesn't want to fight, doesn't have the necessary leadership, doesn't have the culture for successful combat operations. Now, I would have never thought this before the war started, that we would be talking about manpower problems in the Russian military. I mean, Russia has more than 3 times the population of Ukraine. Yet Ukraine does not have a manpower problem. In fact, they've got more than 700,000 troops in uniform. They've got plenty of women and men who are military age, fit, who want to fight. Their system for getting them into the fight is improving with each week. On the other hand, Russia is having to look everywhere to find new troops. In a very interesting statement just a couple of weeks ago, President Putin said he wanted to grow the Russian military by another 137,000 troops in 2023. First of all, that's never going to happen. There are not another 137,000 Russians that want to come join the army to join this fight. All the numbers that I see coming out of the Kremlin turn out to be false. They can't even fill the formations that they have now. But it is perhaps revealing that he would acknowledge that they've got to grow the size of the army. It's always been interesting to me that they have decided not to do a mass mobilization where you could harness all the manpower that's there. They're not doing this because, number one, they would have to admit that what's happening is a total disaster right now so far. And also, I think they would be humiliated. Where's the Russian Navy? Before February, the Black Sea Fleet controlled basically the entire Black Sea. It was unchallenged. They had cruise missiles, caliber missiles, but over the past 6 months, we've watched the realization that the Russian Navy is no better than the Russian Army. The sinking of the Moskva, the flagship, of course, that's what got everybody's attention. But since that time and the loss of a few other Russian vessels, the Russian Navy, the Black Sea Fleet, is hiding behind Crimea. They are terrified to go anywhere near the Ukrainian coastline. And Ukraine does not even have a navy. So this is an asymmetric response by the Ukrainians using Neptune, Harpoon, and other capabilities in combination with drones to keep the Russian Navy away from Ukrainian coastline. The great Black Sea Fleet, other than their submarines, I think is a total waste. It hadn't been in the fight, and as Ukrainian forces get closer and closer to Crimea, soon they're going to be able to start launching HIMARS rockets and other rockets into Sevastopol, making it untenable for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. There's a lot of talk about sanctions. The impact of sanctions is starting to be felt in this conflict. We know that the Russians cannot replace the precision weapons because they can't get the components that they need. They're using old technology to try and replenish some of their precision weapons. We also know that Kremlin is now looking to North Korea to buy artillery ammunition. The so-called second best army in the world is turning to North Korea for artillery ammunition. That doesn't speak too well for the Russian defense industry or their logistics. But sanctions are also having an impact domestically. As we talked about last time, Aeroflot is having to cannibalize some of its airplanes just to keep others in service. Most Russians, this is how they travel around Russia. It's either by train or on Aeroflot. And I think that the combination of the impact of sanctions on the Russian population and the impact of battlefield losses over the next 2 or 3 months is really going to start to raise the temperature on the Kremlin. They can't spin it away. They can't conceal it anymore. I think this is going to be something for us to watch as well. Will between the Kremlin and Western capitals, Washington, London, Berlin, Paris, Rome, all the capitals of Western Europe. If we can stick together, keep the sanctions in place, and continue to deliver everything that we said we would deliver to Ukraine, Ukrainian victory is inevitable. But this is not easy. Winter's coming. There is so much concern about gas prices, energy prices. Back in the United States, people talk about the cost of energy. It's the same in UK. It's the same across Europe. People are very concerned about energy costs as it begins to get colder. All of us are prepared to put on an extra sweater, but that's not the biggest threat. The biggest challenge is going to be impact on industry. Our leaders have got to talk to our populations and explain why we're doing this, why this matters, and what we're doing to mitigate the challenges associated with Russia cutting off gas. With what the Kremlin has done, they played their gas card too early. Germany and others had time to start looking for other sources, other methods to find ways to make up the deficit. This is not going to be easy. This is going to be very tough. People's jobs, economies will be affected. But this is about more than jobs. It's about stopping the Russians from threatening not only Ukraine, but other European countries. Thousands of Ukrainians have been murdered by Russian forces. Every day, hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers are killed or wounded fighting to defend their country. A young, struggling democracy against an autocracy. That's what this is about. And you can be sure China's watching this. The Chinese are watching to see if we can maintain our cohesion, if we can maintain our support of Ukraine, if we're willing to do whatever it takes, economically as well as militarily, to make sure that Ukraine wins. I think the Chinese will be impressed. But if they see that we collapse in the face of economic pressure, then I don't think the Chinese will be too impressed by anything we say about Taiwan. And I remain very optimistic about how this is going to play out in Ukraine, that Ukrainian victory is inevitable. But it's not easy, it's not cheap, and there's a lot of hard fighting still to go, a lot of sacrifice by the people of Ukraine. I look forward to talking to you next time.